We'll wait for more people to join. Welcome to this meeting, to this webinar. It's the first time we're doing this on Zoom, so expect technical difficulties, but that's what you get for an actual live session. So excuse us if we fumble for that a little bit on the technical side. But anyways, I see people joining here. That's good. So we'll hit the ground running. Everybody's here, and we'll do the fun thing, which is the immersive view. So you wonderful people actually can look at this and look at us and look at some slides, and then we'll talk about this. The important thing here, this is a live event, right? Everybody that's joined here. It is about talking to us. This is why I came here. So if it's the first time you're using Zoom in that fashion, you'll find a little Q&A button on Zoom where you can actually ask some questions. Like, put those questions in and we'll get to them and we'll answer them for you. Right? Some people have already sent in a few questions, so we kind of prepared a few answers for that already. But for everybody that is now joining live, of course, put your questions in there. And we'll give you all our expertise and knowledge and what have you that we can provide. Right? That's the idea here. So I'll start the screen share, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we are we do today on this Zoom event. So the first thing is, of course, that we talk a little bit about us, right, and what we're going to do. So first, we'll also, of course, talk a little bit about the current job situation. Many of you are here to break into the space and to actually become a software engineer. You should know what the landscape looks like. It's worse than you think. We'll get to that. Then, of course, we'll talk about how people are doing it wrong and why they don't succeed, the beginner mistakes in terms of what they learn and how they learn. And then, of course, what to actually expect when you change into that role. Our panelists here today have been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. You'll see in a second. And then, of course, we have a free Q&A. So if you want to talk to us, please do put it in the Q&A box or put it into the chat, and we'll go from there. So if you don't know me, it's interesting why you're here, but I'll tell you also who I am and who our panelists are. Basically, that's me. I'm almost 40 years old now. I still got a year left before I hit the big 4-0. And really, I was always curious about programming, about computers, about technology, and somehow I ended up programming a lot in the 90s, right? What does it mean, right? In the 90s, I started with QBasic. I don't know which age bracket our audience is in here today, but QBasic looked like this, right? And I did it on a computer that looked like this. And now you might say you're an old fart, which is true. But of course, now I've been through the technology. I mean, I have evolved since then, right? At the moment, I'm working as a senior developer at the RIB group. Also, what is important to tell you people here, any kind of opinion that you might hear is, of course, my personal opinion and not the opinion of my employer. I work in a robotics R&D department. Somewhere along the way, I also acquired a master's at the US Vienna. And of course, I'm the head coach of Rakete mentoring. And we'll talk about that. You can find me on various social platforms that you see here. If you don't want to talk to me in the chat, you can always find me and talk to me. I'm always open to help people out. Then our first panelist is Isabella here. And
Hi.
Maybe she says hi and talks a little bit about herself.
Yeah, so I think you can see on the slide, I'm currently working as senior developer at Knap. Yeah, it's a logistic company in Austria, and I was always interested in computer and always tried to look inside and see how this stuff is working. Yeah, and so I moved on to visit a school, a technical school, and started programming there actually. Maybe also interesting is that I never studied, so I just jumped in and started working at Knap and doing my projects, and there I am still 20 years later.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
never ends. It's kind of interesting, right? So you've been doing it for a long time. You didn't
exactly.
study. Do you feel like you missed out?
No, actually not. No. Don't feel so.
And then because in my case it was like I started working as a software engineer before I had a degree as well. And then I felt like as working in that position, I felt like shit, I missed out. So then during my first years as a developer, I then went to university kind of to catch up. And also don't feel like that was necessary. But maybe then Alex can tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
himself and about his, because he did a little study here and there.
Yeah, I was studying computer science in the University of Athens, in the University of Economics and Business here in Athens.
Mhm.
I actually finished my studies, so I got my degree, but I had started working as a software engineer before even I got my degree, like you guys. I also feel that in order to become a software engineer, you don't need a university degree or something, or even studying that hard, because programming is more about practicing than studying.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm working as a software engineer for a company here in Greece and in Denmark. That company,
Mhm.
in various domains. I will used to work on projects that had to do with e-commerce for big retailers here in Greece. And currently, I'm working on a taxation product that the company is designing. And for the last almost 1 year, I'm working as a coach in Rakete mentoring, and I'm usually dealing with beginners or people that want to start their journey into programming right now.
Okay. Yeah, that's of course pretty good. Pretty good. Here also the question, right? You also realized at some point that the university degree is nice in a sense, but really not a necessity, right?
Yeah, actually,
So yeah,
because we all here are an example that you don't have to have a degree to be a software engineer. I started working before even finishing all the classes and getting my degree, so it
I
doesn't really matter to have it.
I usually like my approach here or my opinion is that it is definitely a good thing. It's not like, hey,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
university is stupid, but I feel like it is a thing that you do afterwards, right? You should start working as a programmer for a few years
Mhm.
and then like maybe learn a little higher level concepts and
Mm.
go
Exactly.
about that day. Um, and that's definitely something I would recommend. But of course, we also don't know the audience, so I'll launch a quick poll here as well. So we kind of also get a feel for who is watching here. How long have people been trying or been learning? And we'll look at the results, of course, after the people have voted on that, and we'll go on with the things that we talked about. The agenda, yeah, the current worst job landscape. Um, it's worse than you think, but not for the reason that you might feel. Like if you've been on social media and you'll see, oh, the job market is a dumpster fire, which it is, but for a different reason. Because if you look at a statistic, and that's a very interesting statistic, I didn't make that up, right? This is from CNBC. It's from last year, but it really didn't change now in the last 8 months. The thing is, there are like the green people, right, are the potential applicants for the blue people, which represent tech jobs, right? So they're hugely understaffed, and in the green, people represent people with university degrees that would be ready for the job, and that includes kind of self-learned and bootcamp graduates. So anybody that could potentially fill a job. So then what's the problem? This is where some people kind of, okay, the jobs, like then there are 3 times more jobs than people that could do the jobs. What's the problem? Because of course nowadays, yeah, you remember my first PC and all that. That wasn't online, right? And the only way to get information was very tedious by like going to a library or whatever. That problem doesn't exist anymore. So all the information that you could ever want is relatively easy to access. There are shitloads of courses, there's content, anything that you want to look up, you can look up, right? So the problem is not getting the knowledge in a learning sense. So what is the problem? It's a skill issue. Oh. And what do I mean by skill issue? That people tend to focus on the wrong things. That people tend to have a wrong idea about what they should learn and how they should learn and what it takes to be productive in a professional environment. And they spend lots of effort just doing the wrong thing and then don't succeed. And we'll talk about those beginner mistakes and those like wrong mindsets here. So you can do it the right way for one, and be a happy man or woman, whatever that means. The problem really is that nowadays it's very easy to get you to perceive that you get very far by doing very little. Right? Anybody that I don't know if Isabella or Alex has done a little JavaScript from time to time. You did? You hated it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all good. But really the reality of things is if somebody comes in completely fresh and now the poll results are also coming in, we are very split here. So we have basically 50% that are in the 0 to 4 weeks category and 50% that are in the more than 1 year category. So people that just basically came fresh off the boat and people that have been doing it for some time. So we will address that audience as good as we can. But the thing is, you can basically go online. You type literally 3 commands, and all of a sudden you have a web page that you can edit, and it's a React thing with the server backend, and everything's prepared for you. And instantly you feel like that's not hard. I can do that, right? And those quick results where you can just do your boilerplate thing and you follow along your tutorial and you build a to-do list application, feel very capable because suddenly you can see the result, is just very far removed from what you actually do as a software engineer. And many people, and this is what makes the job market a little shit, because there are so many people that feel, for that reason, that feel they know what they're doing, but they're not. And then they go to an interview and fail catastrophically. Maybe you can also share some insights in that. I mean, you're all self-taught developers, right? You beautiful people. Did you ever reach a point where you felt like capable enough? Oh, I know what I'm doing. And how did in your opinion, how did the reality set in when you actually did it in a company?
Good question. Yeah, sure, there were, but I'm working at the same company for a long time now, so I'm feeling capable of doing things. But still, there, I think, okay, now there are new things to do, and yeah,
I mean,
capable of.
you don't remember your first week? Is it too long ago?
Oh, I remember it. It was really, really hard because I came off from school and I didn't do a lot of real programming, and it was really hard, to be honest. And I had to learn a lot just to jump into the software in the company and see what was already there, and to understand it. Yeah, was tough, to be honest. Because as you said, what you learn in school is completely different than to what you have in the company then, yeah.
Alex, do you remember your first weeks as a software engineer?
Yeah, I do. And I was actually feeling the thing that you were describing earlier, that I was kind of invincible because they sent me a test before hiring me, and the test seemed very easy. But when I just stepped my foot inside the workplace for the first day, then my whole world just disappeared because there were real tasks that were not as easy as the videos describe or the courses describe, and of course that made me feel weird, and I had in my mind my only thought was what I am doing in here. I know nothing, so
Yeah.
that was very strange and weird.
That's something that, I mean, happened to me as well, because really in my story I was programming, yes, by myself without any proper any proper guardrails. And then the relative things is very different. And this is also where many people kind of, I mean, in our cases, right, we were good enough to get the job at that point. I mean, in my case, that's because I did it for 10 years by myself, which is not a very efficient way of doing it. But the thing is that many people like really learn by following along in a very confined and optimal place, which can be good to kind of get an idea, but that is not the reality that you expect in the workplace. And handling the situation that you will expect in the workplace is, of course, the criteria to get hired. Because if I want to hire somebody, I want that person to actually be able to do the job that we do at the company and not just write to-do list applications, because we don't need that at the company. And I've seen it very many times that people spend, it might be interesting specifically for the people that have been doing it for over a year here, that really do one thing after the other and like try, like actually put effort in. But in the end, when they come to an interview situation, they don't even have the basics down, right? And then don't get the job. I've been in interview situations where this was the case, where somebody came in full of energy, right, full of confidence, but failed at the easiest tasks. Where then really the discrepancy between self-perception and relative things is so far apart that it's really hard to do that. So how are you not somebody like that? You need to avoid some mistakes, right? Because it's not your fault, right? If you are learning by yourself, or even if you learn at university, it's not your fault that you're doing the right things, because you just don't know what you're doing. And that's okay. We all didn't know what we're doing. We know it now. We know it now after doing it professionally for tens of years. We know it now, but we also didn't know it back then. And now, of course, Alex and also Isabella has worked with beginners. I have worked a lot with beginners, and I see how they, yeah, what they do a lot. And it very often boils down to, just because you can make things work doesn't make you a software engineer, in the same way that if you can build a shelf from IKEA doesn't really make you a carpenter, even if the output is a shelf of questionable quality. Um, so let's talk about one of the big ones. The discard and try again approach. If anybody wants to weigh in on this, because he has also seen that a lot, right? Where people say, hey, I'm trying something, I'm trying to build a thing, it doesn't work for some reason. And instead of actually trying to figure out why it doesn't work, they throw it all away and try a completely different approach. And I mean, you can put it in the chat, you can put it in the Q&A section if that is something you people do, because I've seen it time and time again. So Alex, what's your experience with the beginners that kind of do that?
It's so failing is just is a part of learning. So if you just discard everything and you don't have the tendency to just check and see what's going wrong with that block of code, you are never going to learn, because we people learn from our mistakes. And this is the same thing on your journey as a programmer. You have to fail to learn. I try to what I do, and I see that on my work too. When we have like junior developers, they're doing the same thing sometimes. So what I do is that I try to like to teach them that in order to teach yourself, you don't have to discard everything. try to identify what is the issue, how it doesn't matter if it fails, just find out why it fails, because this is going to teach you what the mistake is, what the error is, and help you understand and avoid doing that in the future. So, yeah.
I have my own opinion on that, but why do you think people don't or like shy away from actually exploring
Because
what?
they are new to this game.
Yeah, of course.
I think that this is the main concern of people, and also I think that people don't like to make mistakes, so they want to try to make something that it works. You can't have, for example, an IKEA chair with 3 legs. So instead of trying to open the box and see why there are 3 legs in there and call IKEA and say, okay, you sent me 3 legs, maybe they think that if I disassemble it again and start assembling it back, then I can find the problem.
Then it suddenly works. But I do feel that the analogy is not quite on point. It very often feels to me that people say, I'm assembling the chair. They look at it, it has 3 legs and say, okay, I'm just gonna buy another chair somewhere else. IKEA chairs are shit, right?
Yeah.
Which might fix the problem, but again, we like it doesn't fix the problem. It kind of fixes the problem in a way to have the end result. But again, it's not a very viable approach that anytime something goes wrong and you have a problem with your chair, you just buy a completely new one. And that's the biggest mistake. Yeah? Anytime something doesn't work, and this is what we do as software engineers, you will agree. Things don't work things are
Sure,
broken
yeah.
all the time, right? And our job is not to just build it again, but to actually figure out where the issue is and fix it. So that's one of the biggest mistakes, which kind of brings me to the next big beginner mistake is like this fear of errors, right? Where people you're beginning, right? You have no idea. You write some shit code, it doesn't work. That's okay. You get some error messages. And for some reason, people go, and try to delete everything and just get rid of the error by randomly typing things, but they very often, they refuse to just read an error message or go a step further and try to understand what an error message actually signifies. And the problem here is that with enough force and with enough motivation and blind typing, you can make the error go away, right? And then it might even work. But if the same thing happens again, you fall back into the same procedure where you throw your keyboard at the cat in the hopes that the error goes away instead of actually understanding it. Because once you understand it properly, for one, you don't make that mistake again. But even if something similar pops up, you can actually fix it. And we'll come to that point as well, that is the main skill, right? We all, and you again, you will agree, we all constantly work with things where we have no idea what the fuck is going on. And we will never know every situation. This is not what makes us senior developers, but like just the avenue of being brave enough and doing it often to actually find out what the fuck's going on and understanding. And if you don't have that approach as a beginner and you never learn it, you're gonna have a bad time. There's just no way around it. And that's a question I always wanted to ask you because I definitely know it from my career. Have you ever met some developers that basically operate on the same on the same procedure still because they never really learned how to do it properly? And those are the people that usually are very stressed out because their only avenue of fixing things is typing and hoping instead of understanding. Have you ever encountered people like that? Maybe you work in better companies then. That's
And I'm sure that every company or every team, every squad in each company has a person like this that works like this. I
I mean,
have run
not
across a lot of
100%,
people
but
like this.
For
not,
sure, there are some
yeah,
of them. Yeah, for sure.
those are not happy people. Another big, and we do have some Q&As, and we'll get to that, dear viewers. A big mistake is this, right? People start out with some kind of course. People start out school, with university, have you? And they feel like it's a game where you can score points, and as soon as you have reached a certain amount of points, you're good, right? Whereas, hey, I've done 50 exercises, I've passed every test, I've done all the things. Now, pretty please hand me my job. And this is probably more a question for Alex, because I have my own experience with people that graduated university with you, right? How would you rate their, like in general, how would you rate their capabilities, or how many of those people were maybe did pass all the tests, even graduated, but really had no idea in the end what they are doing?
The funniest thing, except that, is the fact that they got their degree with like flying colors, and this is kind of funny. But yeah, I don't have any particular examples in my mind, to be honest, because I'm not the most social person in the world.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of people that actually graduated had that mentality, but a lot of them also failed, and they turned themselves to other roads, maybe master degrees or things like that, because they didn't manage to get the job. Because it's another thing, like completing projects and exams in the university, and of course another thing to try and finish test with good results in an interview. To be honest, it's a completely different thing. So yeah.
I mean, that's maybe my perspective is a little bit different, because I did the whole bachelor's master's things while already working as an engineer. But I could definitely, and I know that from the people that graduated, that a good percentage of those were very good at getting a degree, but really not very good at the task. And of course, that is a huge beginner mistake, right? Any kind of exercise that you should be doing, or that you do, it doesn't really matter which one, should have the purpose of exercising, of learning new things, and not necessarily of finishing the thing. Because in the end, yeah, you might get congratulated in the end, but really, if you don't have the skills in the end, then it's gonna be hard. Yeah, and it's gonna be hard specifically in the job situation here, that if you haven't done it, everybody has had a job, and everybody says, "Yeah, my job is a dumpster fire." That's very true. But from the from the uh, from the perspective of somebody that hasn't been in the IT world, really, it's always gonna be a shit show, of various forms, and that is something that is very seldom taught. This is something that very doesn't really get talked about too often. Are many things, and I think the most, specifically for me, I think the most culture shock was really legacy code, where when you do this by yourself, you feel like, oh, for one, you're starting on a clean slate in your projects and all that. But you always usually start with the newest shit. But you feel, that's nice, that's new. And then suddenly you get into the job market, and it might very well be that the code base that you'll be working on is ancient. It's 10 years old, it's 15 years old. And the people that have written it no longer work at the company. And There you go, right? And you need to kind of figure way out. Maybe you also have some experiences like that, where you like let's put that into the onto the table. If you remember, what was like the oldest piece of code you had to work with?
For sure, there are still pieces of code that are at least 25 years old. Still.
So that's basically code now that Isabella works with, or tries to avoid probably.
Yeah.
The things that have literally been written in the year 2000, right?
Yeah.
Alex, what's the oldest shit you have ever touched?
I am lucky enough to start in projects that are in their first step. So I haven't worked with legacy code, to be honest, but I have worked with legacy, let's say legacy code that means an old framework.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this was written back in 2008, 2010, for example, and we were working on it on 2018 and 2019.
So
So
that's a good
yeah,
10 years.
yeah, a good 10 years of technology and framework. So that requires a lot of patience, to be honest, and a good amount of coffee. And
Yeah.
yeah, just patience is the best tool.
Yeah. I mean, patience, one, yes. What was your experience with that? Did you, when you had to work with this code, did you have access to people that were super familiar with that, or were you kind of left alone with it?
No, we were left alone with the documentation of the framework, and the documentation wasn't that good, to be honest. So we had to find out a lot of things by ourselves, and that goes back to the discussion we were having earlier with errors and strange things appearing in the code and not scrapping the whole thing, just debugging and debugging again and see what F is going on. So yeah, trying and trying and trying again until we find the result that works for us, and then try to identify what the procedure was in order to trace it back and understand what is the situation and how that whole thing is working. Because this should be the procedure in order to build some knowledge and share it with the other guys.
Isabella, did you have somebody to guide you?
Sometimes yes, but most times the people are no longer there, or because if we are talking about code that is 20 years old, for example,
Yeah.
often the guys are no longer here. Yeah, so as Alex said, you need to investigate there and debug, which is often on some platforms not even that easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm working with a cool Java or C# debugger. That's yeah. So it means a lot of work. And as you said, the documentation, which is really important thing, is often not there for all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that how often this is what happened to me as well. I was also thrown into a code base that was ancient in terms of technology, but was maintained, right? Maintained for longer than the actual support window in that company. And because we talked about that, very often you felt like, Jesus, that shit show. I just wanna, can we just do it? Can we just start fresh? Right? This is old, this is broken. Can we just do the new thing? And that just never happens, right? Because nobody really in a company wants to give that kind of manpower and tasks to actually build it afresh. Because the thing still kind of works. We just need to fix it one more time, right? To keep it going. And in my case, that was a Visual Basic 6 code base, right? For those people that don't know about that, the many moons ago, probably also 20 years or more, it was kind of hard to build graphical user interfaces. And the easiest way to do that was Visual Basic. Not to be confused with the newer Visual Basic.net that is still around, but Visual Basic 6, which Microsoft abandoned about in the year 2002, right? And it was a huge code base, and they, as I said, maintained it. The thing is, of course, the last like Visual Studio version that actually supported this was Visual Studio 2004 or something like that, or 2006, which is also a little bit shit. But the code base has grown so much that you could not debug it anymore. If you actually would put a breakpoint in, it would crash. And they were in that situation for over 2 years already, and they still maintained it. And then I got thrown into that, and it was a complete shit show. And apart from the language being not supported and the tools being shit, actually nobody knew what was going on, and you couldn't even debug the thing because it was broken. So those kind of things are to be expected. Not everybody will actually end up in 20-year-old code, but at a certain company size, you will always come across that, and nobody prepares you for that. And this is also very hard to be prepared for that, to be honest. But it's something to expect and to just be aware of, that you're not just gonna join a company and they will say, hey, could you please build us this program? You can do it however you please, and you use the newest tools and the shiny things, and everybody's gonna be happy. That's just not what happens. And here really also when we talk about all the organizational effort that happens, right, in a company. If you're just by yourself and you're learning, you probably don't. You don't do meetings with yourself, right? You don't do stand-up meetings. You don't do Scrum meetings. You don't do all the things that all the developers hate. And you will at a certain point be capable, right? You will at a certain point have pretty good ideas, and your dreams will be crushed because resources will not be allocated to do it properly. Maybe we have also experienced that, but that is also something to kind of be aware of, that it's not all fun and games, and that it is a business in the end, and they very often don't care about your feelings as a developer. They care about the product being ready to be sold.
And there are times, from my experience, that developers already know that the thing that they implement is going to be wrong. It's going to produce bugs. It's going to be phased out in 2 months because there's another requirement that will come because of the current requirement. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating sometimes, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And again, so this is also the next slide here, really the thing, you always expect that, specifically now. And when I started programming, again, I feel old about this, but the situation was, why would you do that? Right now, people feel like, I can sit at Starbucks all day and be doobly-doobly-doo and make a lot of money. But the reality of things is you have lots of design work, you have lots of documentation. Most of your code is not going to be very fancy or cool. This is also something that for the people that have been doing it for a year or two, right? Where you do some code challenges, where you maybe enter into advent of code and you find wonderful things and you learn cool procedures. But the reality of things is that even for me, right, I work with cool stuff with robots, and we do a lot of research work, but still like 80% of my code is very boring, right? Because it just needs to do a thing that we just need to do, and it's not going to be very fancy. But all in all, and you will probably also agree on that, but all in all, it's still fun, right? It's not like we all hate it, because we've been doing it for a long time.
It's still fun, yeah. Even if it's often hard, to get into this thing and find the bugs and so on, but it's still fun,
It is. It definitely is. So that's the thing. If you know what you're doing, right? If you don't know what you're doing, then it becomes not fun anymore, right? Because then you will put hours and hours in. and it's going to be very hard. It is fun if you have your fundamentals down, you have developed the avenues on how to work in unknown situations, right? In terms of code, because that is something, when you got that down, the next unknown situation is not going to be so bad because you have done it a few times, right? And this is really the one of the key takeaways. Of course, you need to understand your basics. Of course, you need to understand how to program stuff, but the real skill comes from being able to figure your way out of an unknown situation. And I feel like that is a big part of what we do. Maybe you agree. That's really it. We do have a few questions in here, and now it's basically time for the Q&A. We also have some questions that people sent in, but I would just want to start with the things that came in the live Q&A thingamabob. And there's one question that says, many people aren't familiar with imposter syndrome for that reason. And that basically came in when we talked about the wrong approaches and beginner mistakes. My first question to you guys would be, did you experience the imposter syndrome? How did you experience that, and how often? That would be my question to you, because I have my own little story and we'll get to that. You've you never felt it. I'm awesome.
No, I did sometimes because I did feel that sometimes because there are some interviews that I had a lot of years ago that were easy because the companies were big and didn't care about getting the best people out there. So I was kind of thinking that, okay, the interview process was a bit easy and I'm not that good, so I tricked those guys. But my best experience was with a guy that the company that I'm working on currently. There's a guy that he didn't know anything about programming. I don't know how he was calling himself a software engineer, and that was very, very fun because he was in our team and he was trying to convince us that he was that good that we couldn't imagine how good he was.
Okay.
So I don't have a lot of experiences from myself, but I have that really big one from that guy.
Okay.
That was kind of funny, to be honest. I remember that guy once every 3 months. He's a manager now, of course.
For sure, yeah. Most times, but we had we had a business coach at one company I worked for, and yeah, he coached us in developing stuff and testing environments and whatever. And he always talked like he was, yeah, the best ever, yeah. And but after some time, we recognized that he took just a lot of money, not knowing anything.
Yeah, it's a good job. I mean, for one, in being a consultant of sorts is very often very well paid. Of course, now I'm shitting on my own doorsteps because in one avenue, of course, I coach people and tell them what to do and how to learn. But really, in terms of imposter syndrome, I have my own little story because it hit me very hard after 5 years of doing. Right? So obviously, I was an asset to the company, and all is well. But I was just stuck on a specific problem for more than a week, right? Maybe 2 weeks, and I didn't fucking figure it out. And at that point, I felt like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And this is where I really didn't, in the end, of course, I figured it out, and the solution was, in this case, a piece of fancy code, right? And not many lines of code that actually fix the problem and actually reduce the runtime of a specific process by 2 orders of magnitude. So it get like 100 times faster. I was very proud of me at that time. But during those 2 weeks, and after those weeks, I really also figured out that you don't really get paid to write lines of code. You get paid to find out solutions. And if and you will agree, right? A big part of that is not writing code, but it is thinking about things, figuring stuff out, and then with purpose writing some code to actually address this. And the other thing that I very well, like that I noticed in terms of imposter syndrome, people at university with people that are junior devs that got hired. It's because imposter syndrome in that sense is very often where you feel like, hey, I don't have the skills that I get paid for, right? Where you will get the feeling, so hey, shit, I don't know what I'm doing and I shouldn't really be here. And for many junior devs, this imposter syndrome, in my opinion, is just an excuse because really they don't actually have skills, and they feel like they don't actually have skills because they don't actually have skills, right? And then they bitch and say, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome. Who am I?" I said, no, not for you. You don't have imposter syndrome. You just don't know what you're doing. So anytime you feel like you have imposter syndrome, I feel like you can only claim imposter syndrome after 2 or 3 years of being in the industry. That's really it. Anything else, your skills probably suck. I don't want to step on anybody's tail, but that's the reality of things. Another question from Ellen here. What sources do you use in order to get feedback when doing projects or getting stuck? So maybe Ellen can give us a little bit more context, because that really depends if you are in a phase where you are alone, right? And learning, or if you're in a phase where you're actively working and you're confused. Um, let's put it that way. Like when I get stuck, which again, everybody gets stuck all the time, right? So that's part of the business, part of the game. But of course, yeah, you go to Google, you go look for help. But in my case, really now I've been doing it for a long time, and the problems that I encounter are usually of a kind that are not Googleable anymore, where nobody else had the same issue, or where nobody on Stack Overflow actually asked such a question. And then it's very sad, because you then ask the question, you wait for 2 weeks and nobody answers. Where you are at the complexity level where you can't find anything, and the only thing that you can do in this case is really explore the problem as much as possible and learn about those details that you don't 100% understand, that at some point it all falls into place. If you, of course, are by yourself and you're learning, then how do you get feedback? You talk to somebody that has done it for someone, right? This is the reason why we have started the mentoring program, to give people that avenue to talk to somebody that has been doing it for 10 years, that can guide you through the thought process of how to figure things out. It is exceptionally hard by yourself, because if you don't fully understand the problem, and Isabella and Alexandros can probably agree here, it's very hard to even formulate a question to find a proper answer. If I sit somewhere and say, hey, I have no idea about cars, right, but it's broken, and that's all I can formulate about it, it's going to be very hard to fix it. Right? So the only avenue is to bring your car to somebody that knows about cars, that can say, hey, your alternator has exploded, right? So that's a very major thing. And in your company, like if you work at a company and you encounter a problem as a junior developer, the art of asking questions and bringing enough detail into the conversation is a skill in of itself, right? So if you're a junior developer in some company and you have a problem, and somewhere down in the corner, there is a fat bearded man that has been working for the company for 20 years, and it always looks very grumpy. If you roll up to him and say, hey, my code doesn't work without any further explanation, he will probably yell at you. If you come with a very precise question and you bring all the details, he will probably be very happy to explain you that one thing.
And buy a cookie for him too.
Excuse me?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And also buy a cookie for him, or a biscuit or something, because
if it's a bearded
25.
fat man,
Yeah,
then
he's
definitely.
25 years in the same company. He's has a beard, so a cookie might work. It's going to work for me, at least. So
I mean, that's the thing. You always learn from people that know their stuff, but those people are busy and just preparing the other person. And that's usually, in my opinion, in terms of information, right? If you call again an auto repair shop and say my car is broken, how much will it cost? You will not get an answer. If I say I have a 2016 BMW 3 Series and my alternator is broken, how much does a new alternator cost? They will tell you a precise answer, right? So that is really how you can effectively gain new information when you're stuck, if you're in the company. Loads of questions here. Okay. A huge problem with computer science education. University, you have to rush through the huge amount of content and classes, and there's not really a lot of time to focus on deeply understanding the topic that matter. Not necessarily a question, but I would agree. Alex probably also will agree.
yep, I do agree on that.
Yeah, it is really like a guided tour, right? Guided tour through a zoo. You see lots of different animals, right? And you kind of vaguely remember them, but you're an expert in none. And that's really the problem with any kind of course in that sense, right? Where the main goal is to just move forward. Like we said, just get another test in, get another exercise in. We don't give a shit. You just did the things. That's a big problem. Next question here. Does searching for solutions on Google make you a better programmer? I want to hear your opinions.
In my opinion, yes, because searching for not searching for solution, but searching for answers in your problems is actually making you a good programmer. Searching for solutions and copying things from Google is not making you better. It's making you worse, actually. So it depends on what you define solution. So solution is like an answer to a question or just copying and pasting a block of code. Answering your questions is the best thing that you can do, and if googling the question is your only source, then it's a good thing and keep doing that. But if you just type in okay how to do that, and or you're asking OpenAI and ChatGPT to provide you an answer and just copy and paste it on your project, then that's for sure not a good solution, and avoid doing that at any cost, my opinion.
At any cost, I would agree.
Yeah.
So that's really an interesting question, because searching for solutions, like the wording, right? So searching for answers is of course the thing that you need to do. Searching for a ready-made solution is kind of dangerous, because you will get a piece of code or you will get an approach that potentially works, right? You find a
never
thing,
know.
sometimes it doesn't, but it could put it happens, right? You take this piece of code, put it in, and it works, which is great. And it's I'm done. But the problem with that is you don't really understand that, right? Why it works. And I promise you, you've missed an edge case. It breaks later down the line, right? And then you can't fix it. So this is also something we tell our clients in the mentoring program, like the worst offender that you can do is using code you don't understand, right? Where you just take a thing and, hey, I found this online. I don't know what it does. Let's put it in. Let's just put it in. It's okay. We'll not talk about it anymore. This will always bite you in the ass later, right? And taking the effort of understanding the problem first, and then I mean it's totally fine, right? If you find an approach online where you can actually follow along and say, okay, I understand what this code does, and then implementing that, even if your own implementation basically looks like you copy and paste it, that's totally fine, right? Because somebody else might have thought about a similar problem and come up with an elegant solution. That's okay. But using the black box, always a bad idea. Alan here was referring to making projects while learning a new programming language. He's currently, okay, so that answered your question. He's currently working in the IT industry and wanted to hear other people's experiences. So Alan, let me know. Do you already work on some kind of software engineering capacity, and are you just curious about a new language? Or working in some kind of other IT field where you want to move into development? That's gonna be then easier to answer. We'll just put that away. That answered your question. Okay. Yeah, so learning new programming languages for people that have been working. I have my own way of doing that. I don't know if Alex or Isabella learns new programming languages for fun or for work. How do you approach that? Or just don't do it?
Usually I don't do it because I always use the same. I jumped into C# when doing when working as coach at your mentoring program. But how did I do it? I just, to be honest, I know the basics of programming, and I just started doing some code and start to check out the language. I don't know how Alex is doing it better than me, for sure.
Alex just asked ChatGPT.
Yeah, this is we're friends. Yeah, I do that. Actually, if I don't have to learn a new programming language, I won't do that. I can spend my time with other things. But since I was dealing with a bit of front-end stuff in older projects, I had to learn a bit of JavaScript. So I first started with the syntax, which is the only difference essentially between programming languages. And then since I know, and most of the programmers out there do the basics of programming, then you don't have to do much other than practicing and spending a bit of time in projects. So I did exactly the same thing as Isabella did with C#. I wrote projects that and exercises that your clients are getting, and then I try to implement them with C#. And this is what I do in general with every programming language if I have to.
Yeah, of course, maybe I'm an exception here. For one, I enjoy that, and what I usually do is, if a programming language looks interesting to me, because in the end it's all the same shit anyways, right? So the hardest part is doing syntax, and there are slight interesting differences in how they work. My recent exploration was just Go language, because of and that's just very advanced. So usually you don't need all of that, right? But if you're interested in that, is that they have a very interesting system of doing things in parallel, which some languages are better and worse at. And I just pick a project, and I feel like, hey, I need to do X, Y, Z, or maybe in your job, you need to do X, Y, Z, and you just try to implement it in that specific language. This is this is the way. And then you relatively quickly get used to the syntax. Then you might either love or hate the tooling. If it's JavaScript, you hate everything and everyone. But apart from that, that's really the key ingredient. I would not learn another language if I'm not very proficient in one, right? Already. That's really a big, again, we can scroll back to beginner mistakes. This is also something where people try to learn 3-4 languages or one after the other, but never in depth. And they then really don't have that foundation, and they will be scratching one surface after the other. And that's really not where you want to be in the end, right? Because it's nice, yeah. And then again, you can do your simple little tic-tac-toe game in 5 different languages, but you still don't know what you're doing. If you're at a point where you can relatively confidently, right? If it's a toy project, if it's a work project where you can with confidence approach it, and you kind of know, so hi, in my favorite language, I can figure this out, most of the things. I think then is the point where you need to dive into that. And usually, depending on the job you're in, right, and the product you're working on, as a junior dev, you will not be thrown into a thing where you have 5 different languages going at the same time. Right? You'll always probably, if it's somehow web related, you always have a little bit of JavaScript, and then you have one backend language, what have you. That's it. You're probably not gonna do a work on a thing that does Python here, does Go there, does a little C++, does a little C#, right? Usually it doesn't happen as a beginner. So learning new languages, do it for fun. I think it's fun if you actually have a good foundation, and then you do that when you need it. Don't learn languages to put them on your CV, right? Because you'll never have the endurance to actually get good at them anyways, and there's just no point, in my opinion. That's a key thing. More languages is not more better. You're not gonna impress somebody specifically when you're looking for a job. So, oh, I know all those languages. Right. And then the interview will pick one of them, and it's going to be the one that you have the least experience. It's like, okay, cool. Can you build me this in PHP? Because you put PHP in there. And you put PHP in there because you set up WordPress once 5 years ago. Happened to me, right? I fumbled through that interview. But there is really no point, in my opinion. And you'll also see what we see very often when you have take-home tests that you get in an interview, right? So you have a little behavioral interview, and you get your technical interview, and you get a take-home test. I've seen it a lot that there is some problem, and then they say, okay, solve it in your favorite language, right? Because they also don't really care about that specific knowledge about a specific language, but they care about how you problem solve. And I've seen that a lot with our clients as well, that they can pick and choose. And if you want to do it in a weird language, don't use a super weird language, but something that's commonly used, that's going to be good for the interview. Because if you can demonstrate that, they know you're good with that one language, you can adapt to another one. I mean, Alex, now with JavaScript, apart from your personal opinion, right, on that hot mess that it is, but do you feel like it took a long time? Could you put some time frame on that so you could do the thing you set out to do?
It took me about 3 or 4 days actually to get the basics of syntax, and then I could just spend 2 or 3 hours to complete my task. Without any previous experience on that. Maybe JavaScript has a simple syntax, to be honest. I don't really hate it, but I don't really like it. But yeah, there are languages out there that have weird syntaxes, and in general weirder than JavaScript. But yeah, if the basics are the same. So if you are familiar with something, is the thing that you were describing earlier. If you are familiar with something, you will just spend a bit of time to understand the syntax. And my experience was that on a full working week, I could complete my task without even having 5 minutes of experience in JavaScript before that week.
And this is also what to expect from the, I mean, the weird esoteric languages, right? Where it's gonna even take an experienced developer a little bit more. But anything that's kind of mainstream, so let's say C#, Java, JavaScript, Python, or PHP even, you can get the idea in a day or two, and you can work your way around in it. That's, but only if you have the foundations. So two more questions that kind of go hand in hand, I feel. One is Austria specific. Servus. Can you talk about salary expectations in Austria for different levels? Junior, intermediate, senior. And we can talk a little bit about that. And when you specifically talk about Austria, of course, we're in the European Union. Yeah. In the European Union, as a junior, you don't get Silicon Valley money, yeah, where people as juniors often start out with 80, 90, 100K a year. So you're not gonna get that in Austria, but you also don't need that because probably your apartment is not 5,000 euros rent, right? It is very niche dependent. That's the one thing I can say, where as a junior, you might start, I mean, it's been a long time, right? The market has changed, but you can set out, if you find your proper company and not some kind of shitty company, that you get about 10% more than the Kollektivvertrag. Right? You can look at the Kollektivvertrag, and you of course want to move up to ST1, like there is those steps in the Kollektivvertrag that you can look at. So usually if you just really are relatively young and you have no prior experience and you get your first dev job, you're gonna be looking at maybe 3K-ish, which is not great, but it usually also increases relatively quickly if you do it the right way. If you stay at the same company, you might get a raise every year, depending on how much they like you and how much value you bring. But realistically, if you want to move up in terms of money relatively quickly, you just kind of need to change jobs every 2 years, which some people might want to do, some people don't want to do, but you can just have a higher salary increase by changing companies. That's the real thing. And if you do that for 10 years or so, or maybe 8 years, whatever, you switch 3 to 4 times, at the end, you will end up in some kind of leading role and will go close to the 100K. Also in Austria, not necessarily for an Austrian company, mind you, but very often for a little bigger conglomerate that maybe has like Germany, Switzerland, the DACH region. But it all boils down to how well you can sell yourself. And it's not gonna be a shitload of money in your first job. You need to be aware of that. If it's your first programming job, but you can work your way up there. And at some point, if you become relatively good, you have value to the company, and then you can basically blackmail them into giving you more money, threatening to leave. That's just the reality of things. If they don't want to lose you, some companies will tell you, yeah, everybody's replaceable, and that's true, but to what cost? And then you can probably work your way up as well. And last question here. Thoughts on full stack industry? All the open occasions I see about it expected to be a man of 1,000 skills from what I see. Yeah. Isabella, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah,
Or
but
did you just...
yeah, I think this is a general issue that the job descriptions are always like you have to be a superhero and need to know everything. But as Florian said, if you have the basics and you feel really confident in what you are doing, just go ahead and try it. Yeah, but you need to know some basics, yeah.
You need to know some
to
basics.
be,
That's very true.
yeah.
But I also feel like, and I kind of see this with our clients a lot, where many people get very scared
Yeah.
of those job postings. The reality of things is that those are very often, like, there is a position for a specific task. There is a manager, there's a middle management, and somewhere there's an HR person, and everybody adds a few things on his job application, right? And what comes out in the end is mostly an HR thing, and nobody actually knows what is actually needed, right? So from our experience as well, you don't need to know 5 million languages and frameworks. You don't, right? Because you never do usually. Exception might be startups, right? Where it's 3 people. There's one guy with the money. There's one guy that's the friend of the guy with the money, and they need a third man to do all the coding, right? Um, that happens. That is not a job that you want to take. For obvious reasons. And then you might need to be a master of all things. But realistically, you're gonna build a shit application. That's the scope of one man shows ends relatively quickly. You need to be aware of that. And in any other position, if you come in with a proper understanding of some mechanisms and do some programming, you get a job as well. One of our clients recently got a job at an Austrian company. That does, oh my God, does some kind of SAP connecting service with kind of banks. I have no idea about SAP, and I don't have to. And my client also didn't have to, right? And they use some kind of SAP language, ABAP. Nobody has ever heard of that, right? He got the job. Never touched this before, but he could demonstrate, yeah. Oh, you do this as well. All right. ABAP. Yeah? Horrible thing. Yeah, Ellen. Okay, funny. Okay, so but the gist of it is that somebody that has been doing something very different. That they worked in his own project, worked with a different language, worked more in on the web applications. Yeah, like as his training. He brought the foundations. He went to an interview and got the job, which is also programming, but something completely different. And again, he was able to just get used to the language and the things they do, and there you go. Right. So don't be too scared of the requirements or the different languages or what have you. For everybody that's listening, you can never, and that's really the thing, you can never prepare 100% for the job, right? Because they will be different technologies. And even if you kind of know the tech stack, you don't know if they are like 10 years behind, right? Even if you train for this, oh, I'm gonna learn whatever, Python with Flask, whatever. But they are like 5 years behind. With that specific knowledge, you're fucked anyways again, right? So you can never kind of hone your skill set for a specific thing, and then you go in the job and everything matches up. And of course, every interviewer knows that as well. They're not looking for somebody that, I mean, best case, somebody brings exactly the skills, but it just never happens. And you shouldn't expect that from yourself. Yeah, that's really the gist of it. Yeah, don't worry too much about it. Apply for the jobs that look interesting. If you are confident in your skills, apply for the jobs that are interesting, and then you're usually good to go. That's my opinion. Maybe you have some other ones, yeah? Well, I speak it the truth, my friends.
Yep.
And yeah, sure. So we have slides. Nobody cares about slides. That's not what we're here. So if you people have more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's a kind of an interactive kind of deal. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is exactly this, and I think we already answered that it doesn't fucking matter. The important thing is that you learn one and that you get proficient, right? It's like the questions, oh, what's the best car to learn driving with? It matters not. I would recommend cars that behave properly, right? You don't want to learn how to drive in a three-wheeled car necessarily. I don't want to learn how to drive in a car from 1895, right? 1895, like the funny ones, Ford Model Ts or whatever, with wooden wheels and the accelerator on the steering wheel. So don't do JavaScript. Everything else is good to go. That's the advice here. Just don't do JavaScript. You'll be confused. It's not a very well-made language. We talked a little bit about interviews in the industry as well. Alex, you recently had an interview. I mean, not for a junior position,
Yep.
but tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so it wasn't that
Exciting.
Oh no, it was exciting because when you're dealing with interviews that are not for junior levels, they are exciting because there's a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion in them. So there's a pretty big, there was a pretty big technical part. So we were discussing about a few technical details and things that are Java and Spring Boot specific, because I was on an interview for a Java position. And then we had like a conversation about, let's say, specific problem. So I got some code that those people have already wrote, and they told me, okay, how would you make that better? So we had to discuss a few things that were related to that code. There were some obvious issues that, of course, if you are experienced enough, you will be able to identify, but there were some other issues that were well hidden, and they give you hints to find them and discuss those issues with them, because, of course, based on your experience, you can find all of them, but if you are not that experienced, it doesn't really matter because you're gaining experience by working. So they provided hints in order to discuss them and see how my thought process and stuff. But in general, I have been in a lot of interviews. So it depends on the level, of course, but it also depends on the company and the size of the company, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because bigger companies tend to have more step in their processes, with technical interviews and also cultural fit meetings and stuff. Smaller companies tend to have more coding assignments, which I find interesting, and technical discussions that, like the one that I was describing, which are for sure much more interesting than just asking you questions. Okay, what is this library doing, and what static keyword means in Java and stuff, things like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I also kind of see changing, not necessarily only for senior dev interviews, but also for juniors, is that there was a time like 10 years ago where everybody was hot on algorithmic questions and inverted binary trees, like the meme for that. I'm not certain I can write proper code to do this, like off the bat, right? Can you do this, Alex? Can you just invert the
No.
binary tree?
No, for
No.
sure, no.
Because nobody gives a fuck, right? You don't do that.
No one uses things like those.
We do, right? We do use that, but we usually don't need to come up with it on the spot.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really the key thing. And companies kind of did that for some time, but they also already found out that by having that as part of the interview, really just filters out for people that can memorize some algorithms and not necessarily people that can code. And we don't need people that memorize algorithms. We need people that can solve problems. And what I see a lot is just much more hands-on discussion. Like you get usually some take-home thing, you code that, you talk about that, right? Just to see how, for beginners necessarily, specifically for the interview to find out if the code that they wrote, they actually wrote themselves, right? And just to discuss how they thought about it, how they came up with the solution, and see how they think about those things. And if you have this baseline, if you have your ducks in a row, it's gonna be a relatively relaxing conversation usually, and it's gonna be good. Yeah, so really, we are now moved to a much more skill-based assessment, and skills are key. So if you're well prepared in terms of your skill set, doesn't matter the language now, as we mentioned before, you're in good hands. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. The requirements, yeah, preconditions to start coding. We kind of talked about that already. That's a question that we also already talked about. Do most programmers simply copy code from the internet? No, right? Not the happy ones, not the good ones. That is not a viable way of going about things. That's just it. Yeah, you cannot get very far with that approach because very quickly you'll not find ready-made solutions anymore. That's just the thing. That's all fun and games if you build your dinky little fun project, and you can maybe again build your to-do list. But anything that involves a little bit more complexity, you can't find the bits and pieces. They just don't exist. So if you think you can get paid to do that, you're wrong. Sorry. What's this? Okay. What comes to mind, a nerd sitting somewhere in the dark? How does a dark face look like? Alex kind of sits in the dark, so maybe. Maybe. I mean, share your experiences. I have my own opinions.
No, we're not like that.
Says the man that sits in the dark.
Maybe in my room here there's not a lot of light, but but we're not that kind of people anymore because we have hobbies, you know. I have a lot of them.
Yes.
So the real working place. Okay, when you're working in a office of the company's the company's offices, or if you are working from home, because that's different. If you're working from home, then you can of course make your working place as you want it. But if you are working from the offices of a company, then that's totally different. There are different kinds of people as you would find in a coffee place or something, and there's a lot of meetings around, so not that easy and quiet. There's a lot of light always because light is useful when you're looking into screens. And a lot of big companies have those sweet offices with PlayStations and table tennis tables that you almost can't use. But yeah, I'm a guy that works from home for a lot of years now, so my office, my home office is has my own touch in it. So I have my screens and my proper chair, and if I want more light, I can have more light.
I don't want it.
Yeah, I have a lot of silence, so it's quiet in here, unless I'm talking on a meeting. Then there's no more silence. The whole block can hear me. But yeah, anyway,
that's
we're not nerds. The movies and Hollywood make us look like nerds.
Yeah, that's
We're
right.
not.
I mean, I think the perspective has changed, and nerds are more accepted and cooler now than they were before. And of course, um, I mean, I always sound like an old man, but when I was a teenager and I wanted to get online, it was 1998, right? My father was like, "What the fuck do you do on the internet?" Right? And then my friends were like, "What the fuck do you need an email address for?" So things have changed definitely. Um, but also the common like stereotype doesn't really exist, in my opinion. Sure, those programmers are nerds, but they look like normal people and behave like normal people until you go into a Counter-Strike match and they will probably win, right? But apart from that, I feel like it's very office job kind of situation. Usually those people are very fun to be around. I of course also work remotely and I love it. But in Alex likes it silent. I just full on have my drum and bass playing when I'm programming, and I annoy
Oh,
the
really?
neighbors that way, right? So different kinds of people. But I don't think that the movie stereotype is alive and well. But yeah, that doesn't mean those people don't exist. And those people do exist, and you'll probably find them in some kind of tech job, right? Um, but yeah, it's
A
not
good,
only those people.
sorry, a good example is the fat guy with a beard that
Yes,
works in this company for 25 years that you were describing earlier.
yes,
I am sure that you have an image in your head about that.
yes. I know, I know him, right? He's a nice guy. If you bring him a cookie, he'll answer your question. So that's pretty good. And another comment came in here. Many companies still also check if you're a good team fit. Just having basic manners, being friendly, and knowing how to speak can get you a long way. 100% true, right? A Swedish PhD tech lead I talked to said that he can teach a new hire all he needs to know within a year of being in a company. I doubt it, right? Depends on, of course, what kind of job that is. But at some point in software engineering, you can get somebody to a point where they can do it by themselves. Saying, I can teach you everything there is to know is kind of it's kind of an overstatement, I would say. But soft skills and having the right kind of personality can always not be taught. So many companies are also looking for those traits, such as being team player and high in consciousness. I mean, yeah, if you are an asocial, I mean, with remote work, it's gotten much better. So if you're completely asocial, right, you'll always have a hard time finding a job, skill independent. Or let's put it that way, offsetting you being a shitty person with skill is relatively hard, right? So a prime example would be Linus Torvalds, which is a really shitty person, but he kind of made Linux, so it's okay, right? And he made Git, and he yells at people all day, right? So you can offset your social incompetence with skill. I would not recommend that. Yeah. I also wouldn't recommend being a showman with no skills, where we talked about that as well, because that might also not work out. But of course, in my experience, like 95% of people are okay from a people standpoint, right? If you can, and this is also what you do in a mentoring program, just prepare them to be not super nervous in an interview. You got the social part down, right? So it is a requirement. I don't feel it is a big issue most of the time, right? Most people are not complete buttholes, usually. My experience. Um, so that is definitely true, but usually not something you need to worry about too much. It is the skills that you need to worry about much more, right? Because if you're nice and can talk to people, but you can program, then you can be a car salesman, but you probably can't be a software engineer, right? It is a hard requirement in the end, in my opinion. And when we hired people, I also like, you're a nice dude. I like you, right? I would love to have you as a neighbor, but you can't do the job, so we can't really hire you. That's my opinion. That's the gist of it. Of course, if you're a complete asshat, yeah, then you will also have trouble finding a job at supermarket, right? So, that's a given. That's a given in my opinion. So I don't have any Q&As. Well, of course, you can always send more Q&As, but of course, I'll also talk a little bit about what we do and how we kind of help people in the situation that want to get a job, that are not complete asshats, where the social component is there, but the skills are not there, and help them actually learn it properly. Don't do all the things that we talked about before, where we learn the wrong stuff, too many things at once. Just follow along. And this is where a few years ago I started creating this mentoring program, where I set myself the goal to kind of give people the chance to actually work with very experienced people and learn along the way. Because realistically, for me, that was the case. I was learning by myself for a long time. I could build things. I could not build proper things that were maintainable, that actually were like production ready in a sense, where other people could understand the code. And I really learned that at my job. And everybody here that sits here can also just agree that the real skill set, comes in the first 2 years of being in the job, right? We learn the actual strategies that go into complex things. You learn some itty bitty details that nobody has ever told you before, because you're in the code, you're involved with people that have been doing it for a long time, because just not left alone. And to recreate that kind of same situation, it was a goal to always have very experienced people like Alex here, and also Isabella worked for us for some time, to actually guide our clients and to build close relationships with them. So, because at university nobody gives a shit. Yeah, if you do the test, you get your congratulations. If you go to a boot camp, same thing applies. But we have a small group, so we can actually work with them with constant feedback, with actually talking about the misconceptions that they might have, and get those people to a point where they can do the thing, right? But they're not the Linus Torvalds when they come out, but they know what they're doing. They can learn new skills, and they can actually be self-sufficient and build things by themselves. And that's just a very good and quick way to learn, where it's not about trying to consume and memorize all kinds of various things, but where you can actually be in yourself, look at the situation, figure something out, look something up, and do the things that we all, right, that our clients are going to be doing in the future, and that we do on a day-to-day basis. And really, we do this by going through a few phases. And in the beginning, because we do a very individual approach, it is always important to kind of know where somebody starts. Ellen here, that has asked a few questions, might have, depending on what he does, we don't know, right? But as an example here, might have either just looked at ABAP, or maybe writes a shitload of code in ABAP, right? And to find it out and to kind of figure out where the missing part is, we do just do some simple exercises to see, okay, where are you at? And if you're a complete beginner, that's fine, because with those simple exercises, you don't really need prior coding experience, but you can already start solving problems with code, right? And we do this over and over again until we can be sure that really the baseline foundation is there. So we can talk about something, and I know that our clients understand it. And if a client asks me something, we have a baseline communication set up. And basically, hand in hand with that step is also that you can use all the tools come with software engineering. And this is also something where Alex and Isabella probably can agree. We do write code, yes, right? But we don't write it into Notepad. We don't write it on a piece of paper. There's a lot of things, external tools, tool chains, what have you, that come with software engineering. So let's put the open question here. So how much time right? Do you think you spend in like the act of writing, actually typing code, and how much do you spend on other stuff? Alex does not write code at all.
Yeah, no, I do. And it depends on the tool. So I'm working with a specific tool. It makes code writing very, 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 very easy. So sometimes I realize that if someone asks me to write a block of code in a piece of paper, I'm not sure about the syntax anymore. So so yeah, there are a lot of tools. Code writing is not that it doesn't take that much time anymore, but doing other stuff like debugging or messing with Git or being in meetings takes much more time.
Yeah.
So I don't, I'm not sure that I get the question for that, but I hope that my answer is
No,
clear enough.
that's really the answer here. Yeah? So using the tools properly makes the code writing easier, right? Understanding a debugger, understanding how to actually use version control, which many people when they launch just don't ever touch. And
This is my experience actually. I wasn't involved with version control and Git before my first day on my first job. I had no prior experience to that, and this is one of the best things, in my opinion, that this mentoring program is offering experience with Git, because you are making yourself familiar with one tool that you're going to use for the rest of your life.
Don't say that.
Not sure there for
for the rest of the life, things change, right? When
Yeah,
I started, everything was on Subversion, SVN.
Yep. I've never
But
used that thing.
it's still a version control. And that's also fun because also we have one client that did a computer science bachelor's degree, had trouble finding a job. And when I just started working with him, it was like, hey, you got a computer science degree. Yeah, he had like the idea, right? The concept of maybe version control, but he has never used it. And it's a day-to-day business operation. And that's a skill in itself. And if you don't bring that to the table, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be harder. It's not impossible, but even the learning experience gets so much easier when you use the proper tools, right? When you don't make it extra hard on yourself, because all the tools that we use as software engineers are there to make our life easier. Doesn't take away from the mental effort that we have to do. It's just less effort, right? And learning those things at the same time was also very important to me, because I want our clients to be self-sufficient in the end, and that includes knowing how to use the tools, right? And that includes also planning for whatever they build. Yeah, this is really the third phase where most of the learning happens, where our clients pick a project to go from zero to finished product, where they go through all the stages. That includes thinking about the idea, specifying the idea, making a plan, right? Implementing and building it, where really the most of the learning happens, because then you suddenly are not in this unicorns and rainbows sphere anymore, right? Where you say, oh, I'll build a Netflix clone by following a tutorial. Oh, I'll make a snake game with Pygame, right? Where you actually work on a big and complex project, which brings bigger and complex challenges, and this is really where you learn. And the good thing about that is this is where people by themselves will get stuck at that complexity level, because there's really just no one to talk to. But in our case, it's really it's those senior developers like Alex that can answer you real quick and say, hey, okay, you have this problem, let's talk about it. What do you not understand? Okay, maybe approach it this way and move on, so they can actually move on and learn. And this is very, very effective. And those kinds of projects is also something that was very important to me. It's always something that comes from the client themselves. If it meets two criteria, the one criteria is that it is actually interesting to the client in some way or form. yeah, related to a hobby or whatever, right? And that it is really something useful, that it actually solves a problem, and that it's not just the next homework exercise, right? Where clients have built all kinds of things from controlling their 3D printers to online web apps to kind of manage their cooking recipes to all kinds of stuff. And the reason for that is one, that if you build something you're interested in, it's gonna be like the motivation is gonna be better, right? If you work on something you absolutely hate, you're not gonna finish that probably. And the second thing is those are the kinds of projects that actually demonstrate your skill. If you are a person that can look at a specific problem and build a fully working, maintainable, properly built software application to fix that problem, that's very impressive on the market. It's very impressive to your future employer. Much more than your university degree, much more than you having built 17 things of Udemy, right? Because everybody can do that. It does not really demonstrate your skills in that way. And with this in hand, yeah, people can go to interviews, and we also help them prepare for that in terms of what companies to look for. So like Alan said here, so hey, what is my salary expectations? Maybe you have a number in mind, yeah. Depending on what number you have in mind, you might approach different companies. How to approach them so you can still get an interview, even though your profile doesn't 100% match that, because in that interview, you'll talk a lot about that project because that is somebody like in the technical interview, that's what they're going to be interested in. How did you solve that? Why did you build it? How did you build it? How did you structure it? What problem does it solve? And then in that position, it's a very relaxed conversation because at that point, our clients talk about the things that they have been building over months by themselves. They know the ins and outs, and talking about it is not very hard at that point, right? And that's really what we do with our clients. That if that's something that's interesting to the people watching, of course, either feel free to contact me on any of the millions of social media channels that you can find me on. I'll also click a button where you can click a button. And what we usually do here is, hey, you can just schedule a quick 15-minute call on a phone, and we'll just talk about what you're trying to do, where you want to go, and if it even makes sense, if we should work together, we figure it out. And if that makes sense, we can go a step further and talk about the details, how that would look like for you specifically, what things you need to work on to reach that specific goal that you're looking for. And if everything is well, then we start working and you come out the other end. You do an interview or two or maybe five, and you get your proper first software engineering job. And that's what we do, right? So if that's interesting to you, click the link, find me on any of the wonderful links that you can see here. If you have any more questions, now is the time to ask questions. I think we worked through all of the incoming questions so far. As finishing statement, if you are somebody that is interested in learning to program, if you're somebody that's kind of maybe is already doodling around a little bit by yourself, right? Do it properly and get a job. It's fun, right? You're looking at 3 people here that have been doing it for a very long time, and we wouldn't be doing it if we would hate it, right? So don't be scared on kind of moving towards doing that step, moving towards that, because I've heard it a few times, and it was my opinion as well, where I was programming for fun for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. And I didn't want to do it as a job because I thought, hey, if I do this as a job, I'm gonna hate it. Because everybody hates his job. That's true. That's okay. But it's not so bad, and I still enjoy it, and I've been doing it for over 10 years now professionally, and I still like to do it. So, and then you might still hate the dude from the other office, right? You might still hate the stand-up meeting, but in general, you do something that you enjoy, and you get paid for that, right? So I would highly recommend going in that direction if that is something that's really interesting to you. Just do it. It's okay. It's fun. It's you can sit in the dark alone if you want, or you can go to an office. It doesn't matter. But that is really just the thing that I highly recommend doing it. You're looking at 3 people that probably also. I mean, the people that sit here. Yeah, what would be your alternative job if you can't be a programmer tomorrow? Like
In
if
fact,
programming is dead, what would you do?
in fact, I was doing a different job for some years, yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
in social sector, yeah. But I returned again to programming because it's just more flexible and yeah, I still like it.
And I was trying to be a pilot like 10 years ago, but then I have an issue in that eye, and I couldn't join the Air Force here in Greece. So I went to my second choice to become a programmer because I was into computers for a lot of years before that. And if I, for some reason, stop to be a programmer today, tomorrow I'm going to be something that is probably not equally creative, but I would like to work with cars and internal combustion engines and that stuff.
Right.
Okay.
So we all have our secondary things. I would be hard pressed to find something, but yeah, I do this in my free time. I work on cars and combustion engines for fun. Probably would make that my job. Okay, so we don't have any questions here. Thank all of you for joining. Again, reach out to me after this meeting. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. Might they be career or programming related? I'm always open to have a conversation about those things. Thank the guests for being here, for your insights. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And that's the end of it, ladies and gentlemen. It was a very nice thing. For anybody that is still listening and wants to talk to me in private about potentially becoming a software engineer or having us or the Rakete mentoring team help you with that, then you click the link and we'll do that. And all other kinds of ways. Thank you. Have a good evening. Talk to you soon. And goodbye.